Hi there. Welcome back to another beautiful session. Today we are looking at Q3 episode 2 captioned A Day in the Ministry of Jesus. Let's get right in. This week we are continuing our exploration of the book of Mark. Last week, you will recall, we learned a bit about the author himself. But this week, we're jumping right into his gospel. And trust me, there is a lot to unpack. First off, let's clarify a few terminologies, starting with the gospel. Guesses you have heard of that a lot of times? But what does it mean? It's not really just a churchy term, it just means good news. You will notice that the first four books of the New Testament are referred to as the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that is because they bring us the good news of the life and saving ministry of Jesus with eternal benefits. What could be better? When reading these Gospels, you might sometimes notice differences in the order of events and even in the exact words that Jesus spoke. Now, this is not a contradiction as some may think. On the contrary, it's kind of like when you and your friends go see the same movie and have to recount it to your different families. Chances are, though you all saw the same movie, experienced the same thing, each person will express their experiences differently, sharing from their unique perspective. The same principle applies in the Gospels. In the book of Mark, we experience Mark's unique perspective, not one that has lived firsthand, but one that drew from other people's experiences. For him, what stood out was action. Jesus' genuine interest in the well being of everyone he ever interfaced with. Action scene 1. In verse 16 to 20, we see Jesus walking down the seashore. He sees four brothers doing their thing and he just calls them to quit their day jobs and follow him as fishers of men. Now, there is no discussion on the details of the job description, the benefits, or the remuneration. And boom, these just turn in their resignation letters and follow him. That's a bit impulsive, don't you think? He could have been a con artist or something. Only that's not the whole story. You see, John's gospel fills in the blank spaces. You'll find this principle of comparing the gospels as complementary accounts very helpful in bringing clarity to the text when reading the gospels. John's gospel reports that one of the brothers, Andrew, was actually John the Baptist's disciple and had witnessed all the interactions between John the Baptist and Jesus, including John's affirmation of the identity of Jesus during and after his baptism. So, from the testimonies of John the Baptist, Andrew already knew who Jesus was even before his personal encounter with Jesus. And he made sure to share with his brother Peter, who was in business with James and John, the sons of Zebedee. You get the vibe? So, when Jesus came calling, boy, they were ready to roll. They might not have fully understood what they were called into, but they knew enough to follow him. Whatever fishes of men meant, one thing is clear. Jesus was asking them to do something new, something they had never done before. And that's exactly what Jesus does. He calls to transform people into a much better version of themselves if only they will follow him. He called the willing fishermen, they answered, and their lives and the world itself never remained the same. Action. What to remember thus far? The testimonies of John the Baptist and in extension Andrew about the person of Jesus was enough to fill in the blank spaces and prepare the hearts of the first four recruits even before their first encounter with Jesus. Jesus did not have to preach or market. He simply just called and they left all and followed because of the pre-groundwork already done. Question is, if God was depending on your testimonies to recreate the same experience in the lives of those within your sphere of influence today, how much longer will he need to wait? Think about it. Action scene 2. Now, thus far, we have established that Jesus taking action stood out to Mark, but he particularly focuses on Jesus' action to help people. We find an example of this in Mark 1, verse 21 to 28. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, and an individual who is demon possessed in church starts to cause a sin. And Jesus tells the evil spirit to come out of the man, and it does. Again, action. There is a lot to unpack here. First, when you think of the church, what comes to mind? Let me guess. An assembly of good people, holy people, beautiful people, and all that good stuff, right? Well, thanks for the compliments, but not really. The church is also a place for people who need help. You would notice in this account someone who wouldn't have made that list, a demon-possessed brother in church in the presence of Jesus. So, if you ever felt that you were too bad to get help from God, think again about this brother. The church is actually a place where you can get help from Jesus no matter how bad you think you are or how bad people say that you are. Jesus is still in the business of helping people if only you would let him in. So please don't stay away. Secondly, think about it. It doesn't seem as though that was his first time in church. This demon-possessed brother may have frequented that same church, each time coming and going, and maybe even participated in church programs with his demon in one whole piece. What was it about the spirituality of this church, its membership, and preachers that the demon felt so comfortable being in their midst unperturbed, coming and going at will, and only disrupted when Jesus shows up? Interestingly, you would notice that Jesus did not even directly engage with him, but he just could not contain himself in the presence of Jesus. I guess the real question here is, had Jesus not shown up in that local church, would the brother have remained demon-possessed? Would the spirituality and atmosphere of worship in that local church have remained tolerant for the demon to thrive? In extension, are our hearts and gatherings so connected and spirit-filled that it makes uncomfortable or ignoble presence? Or have we imperceptibly so degenerated to just mere rituals and charisma devoid of the presence of God, so that nothing scares the devil from our midst anymore? This calls for an honest appraisal. Action scene 3. Now back to the lesson. Right after the synagogue scene, after the Sabbath worship, Jesus goes to the home of Simeon, one of his disciples. However, Simeon's mother-in-law was sick with a fever. When Jesus was made aware of it, he goes over, lifts her up, and boom, the fever leaves her body. Interestingly, news of Jesus' casting out the demon in church had spread throughout the town. And as desperately as they wanted to get their sick brothers and friends and relatives healed, Mark carefully but subtly reiterates that they all waited till the evening after the Sabbath was over before bringing the sick. Not that Jesus would have minded, but it shows that the people in Jesus' time acknowledged the sanctity of the seventh day Sabbath. Action Scene 4. And the following verses, the whole town of people suffering from all manner of diseases come to Jesus, and they are all healed. Amazing. A whole town healed of all their maladies and ailments. I believe Mark highlights Jesus' action in healing to show that Jesus rejoiced in his power to restore people to health and happiness, and he has not changed. We all suffer not only from diseases, but sometimes from the consequences of our bad decisions. Jesus wants us to come to him regardless, so he can resolve our problems, just like in Mark's days. He still acts in people's lives today, if only we would let him in. Action Scene 5. Now, having started after sunset and having to attend to the whole town, Jesus must have worked late into the night and ended up very tired. But in verse 35, Mark writes, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. We see the same pattern repeat itself in the rest of the Gospels. There is something that happens in the place of prayers that connects men to God and recharges. It is even more interesting when we take God personal and make him our priority, like we see Jesus do here. Point to remember here is, if Jesus, through God, saw the need to retreat in prayers as a way to recharge, how much more should we adopt this pattern? Think about how Jesus impacted the town of Capernaum with his act of healing, which all happened because he waited in the place of prayer. What is happening in your own community? Who is suffering? What are the people you are working with going through? What do they need? What are they looking for? Have you considered what could happen if you put some of these things on a prayer list and talk to God regularly about them like Jesus did? God is willing to recreate same experiences and results if we are willing to follow his laid down principles and patterns. Why not start today? Action Scene 6. Now, soon after praying, we find Jesus at the end of the first chapter of Mark, again acting to benefit humanity. A man with leprosy comes to Jesus and says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. In Jewish tradition, someone with leprosy was deemed unclean and had to leave the company of loved ones and quarantine with other lepers. Today, we have far worse diseases, but back then, leprosy was one of the worst. Now, Mark makes something clear from this perspective. It's neither too hard nor too late for Jesus to fix. He can do all things, even in the worst situations. Jesus touched the man, spoke, and boom, the leprosy left him. Again, action. Jesus' response to the man reminds us of his stance today. I am willing. Willing to help you, willing to change the situation, if only you will let me in. Remember that. In conclusion, what have we learned from Mark's perspective in the first chapter thus far? 1. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are different perspectives of the same events and therefore are complementary, filling in the blank spaces for clarity. 2. God is depending on our testimonies to soften the hearts of people within our sphere of influence in preparation for an encounter with Jesus, the good news. 3. The house of God is a home to all, none is despised. You can come the way you are, but you cannot remain the way you came. You must be open to change and growth. And 4. Jesus has always acted to help humanity then and now. And there is no issue too great for him to deal with. All through his ministry, he demonstrated the place of prayer as a place to connect with the Father and recharge. We might as well do the same. Task for the week. Jesus left us a pattern to recreate same experiences. Prayer. Start a little prayer list for your circle, for those within your sphere of influence, and pray about the challenges and difficulties that they are facing. And watch God recreate same experiences like He did in Mark's days. And that's it for this week, folks. Next week, we will be exploring the topic controversies. I'll see you then. Just stay tuned. Thanks for joining in today. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's your Sabasco Doodle, doodling out. I'll see you next Sabbath. Say bye.
Bye.
Good.